Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey, and this is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what's up, bro?
We got a lot going on, brother. We got Stats Canada saying that the total population will double in Canada via mass migration in the next 50 years. Canada passes a bill to address environmental racism. Just Stop Oil protesters vandalized historic Stonehenge monument in the UK, while their American counterparts attacked a PGA tour. Ottawa schools see massive student absence amid protests against Pride Month. The majority of Canadians don't have faith in government to stop foreign interference in elections. And Trudeau hits rock bottom with his popularity plummeting. However, if before we get into things, you wouldn't mind tossing a thumbs up on this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel, that would be greatly appreciated as it helps this podcast grow. All right, let's get started. So first off, we've got Stats Canada saying that the total population will double in the country via mass migration over the next 50 years. Statistics Canada projects that the country's population will more than double to over 80 million in the next 50 years, driven exclusively by mass economic migration. The new report estimates that the population will rise to between 47 million and 87 million by 2073, with the elderly population tripling to up to 4.3 million. The moderate forecast is 63 million, but given the current annual influx of over 1 million people, exceeding 80 million by 2073 is likely. This puts Canada on track to reach a population of 100 million by 2100. So do Canadians truly understand what this population growth means for our way of life?
So here's what I would say. I would say let's think about it from an infrastructure perspective. That's probably the easiest way to break it down. And if you look at the numbers, it's basically call it 1 million people a year. It will most likely scale on a percentage basis. So maybe it's 500,000 now and 2 million a year closer to that 50-year mark. And I mean, obviously that's dummy math, but bear with me. So you think about these things that have to change or what's happening. So look at what's happening today. Housing infrastructure, huge problem. Healthcare, problem. Our food infrastructure, problem. Our roads that the Liberals don't want to pay for anymore, going to be a significant problem if you increase our population like that. So if you think about it, like everything we have from an infrastructure perspective has to double. So if this number holds true, then the stress we're already feeling from rapid immigration will get significantly worse without two things. So there's two things I think that we would need to do to be able to manage this. If you want to look at it in a positive way, I'd say humans usually find a way. We're pretty good that way, but here are the two things that I think need to get done. Dramatic change in our ability to scale infrastructure. And this is complicated. So as a nation, we've never shown that we can do this, to scale infrastructure that quickly. Now we've got enough space to do it, but do we have the resources, the manpower? Are we actually going to pull this off? And the second thing, and this is a tough one, government spending efficiency. I'm of the mind that if it does not improve by about 300%, we're totally fucked. So I don't know, man, like it's interesting. I hope I'm around in the year 2100 to see what things look like, because I think it's going to be a bumpy ride.
I hope we're watching from afar, though, not necessarily maybe in the storm, maybe on a nice island somewhere away from all the mayhem. But I don't think people do consider what this means on the cultural front as much either. Like, it doesn't need to be a majority of the people that are coming here that can cause mayhem. Like, I actually think it's probably a minority of people that do want to subvert Canada's way of life, but that is still a substantial number. And what you have to think about there too is, okay, so if you have a certain level of Islamicists who believe that Sharia law should be imposed wherever they go, then you don't need all of them to be on board with that. Even if it's, let's say, 10%, which I think would be actually vastly under the number of people that would support Sharia law from that culture that are immigrating here. Even if it's just 10%, that is more than enough to have the rest of that 90% population, even if they're typically apolitical, just to kind of go with the flow.
Well, if you look at what happened in Mississauga during the pandemic, right? So all these other churches were banned, except one Islamic culture. I don't remember exactly what it was, so I don't want to bastardize it. They were allowed to do prayer outside over a loudspeaker in Mississauga. The reason I know why they were allowed to do that, because I know Bonnie Crombie, who was the mayor at the time. She's now running the Liberal Party for the provincial party, rather. she was doing it because that's how she was able to manage the vote. You need that vote in this city to become mayor. So she just bent over and gave it to them. So to your point, you know, they're not even the largest part of the population, but they have that kind of control through the pandemic when everything was off limits, right?
And then, so you look at something like this. There was, you know, this was a famous instance of it, but it's worth replaying. And again, even if only 10% of the population that's moving here from these cultures feel this way, that's still extremely substantial. And to be honest, he is laying things out properly. I don't agree with his plan for the future of Canada, but he is making sense in the way that if things continue this way, the world he lays out will be the one before us.
By 2060, Muslims will be the biggest religious group the world over.
Right.
What are you going to do then?
Actually,
Post-Sharia is even then. We have families, we are making babies. You're not. Our population is going down the slump. One day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada. Right in your face.
you say that you want Sharia law to displace Canadian law. That doesn't sound very respectful.
In majority, you wouldn't have any other option, my friend.
Here's my problem, and you actually made a really good point going the cultural route, because I just thought about it front of in the kind of more binary, like infrastructure. Can we do this? Can we manage it? Canada won't have a culture, but Canada is also very, very vulnerable, because if you know right now, if you understand this, you go, okay, you know, you're basically looking at India, you look at the population there, you look at how condensed it is, how dense the population is rather. You look at that situation, they look to places like Canada and other parts of the world. If you're like, hey, look, they're going to let 50 million people in there in the next 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is. Here's our opportunity. How many people do we need to get in there until we can run this place? Because I bet it's not that many. Because if you think about it, we're doubling in size and we're already the most multicultural country in the world. So what's actually going to happen here? Canada will not be what Canada is. There is no chance. It's vulnerable. Everybody right now is really pushing against white people and white culture and colonialism and all these things, right? That's just the world we live in. I don't care. That's not really what I'm trying to lean into. What I'm saying is, if that is being vilified right now, right, then there's no way that will be the dominant culture moving into this country. And I don't even mean necessarily skin color, but also the culture itself. So our way of life in this country will cease to exist in 50 years, maybe much less, because I don't know what the tipping point is for this.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, so a lot of people that are of this mind that mass migration is a good thing, because yeah, we should break. There is actually, like, I've talked to people that are intelligent before, where they'll say things like, yeah, well, the world's just heading that way, so we should embrace it and push forward with it faster, which would be like monoculturalism across the globe.
Yeah, like they're
like the world should just be one culture, and it's
That's
insane
so
because
broken. That's so broken.
to me,
that's such a bad idea.
Look, you can look around the world and go, you know what? I know that this isn't a very politically correct thing to say. We live in this world of cultural relativism where we're supposed to be like, you can't look at certain cultures different ways. Well, I'm sorry, like in these, where you look where fundamental Islam has taken over in, say, certain nations like Iran, say, or even Palestine, or any of these extremely like fundamentalist where Sharia law is imposed through their government, man, like they will stone women who have been raped to death because they're now not pure, and they bring shame to the family.
Oh, it's very broken. They do a lot of terrible things, but again, it doesn't even matter. It becomes this whole thing of just accept it and move forward becomes a very dangerous game, because you just lose to the majority. And it looks like you're losing to a majority that no one really like anybody in our culture really wants to be a part of. So you're going to have think about it this way. How many cultures in the world exist? Hundreds, right? Hundreds. And some of them are pretty significant. So if you've got one dominant culture that's trying to push forward and lead the way, you're trying to get all the other ones to stop doing what they do. You're going to have some monoculture. What kind of wars are you going to have for 100 years because of that shit? People aren't dropping their way of life. They'll fight to the death because of it. And they will stop caring about country line, like borders. They'll just be like, where are my people? Those are the people I'm now fighting with. And it will cross borders. It could get really interesting in a bad way, not,
Well, in here, look, this is even Louis C.K. openly embracing this whole concept and saying, like, not only is that, like, not being like, oh, that's a negative consequence that can be dealt with, but like the goal should be that mass mayhem.
I think he's just walking a weird woke line these days because he whipped his dick out.
But my feeling is they should open the border and just let them pour in, let everybody pour in, and then the answer, which is, well, then there'll be all these problems. Yes, there should be. It shouldn't be so great here, is what I'm saying. In America, it shouldn't be. It's a weird thing to sequester a certain group of people and try to keep upping their lifespan and their lifestyle, and just keep trying to increase that for this group of people, and then this pressure of people trying to come in so they can enjoy it. And then it gets worse and worse down here. I mean, I'm not Canada. It's really just from down here. There's something wrong with that. That's not a system that's working, and it forces people to do cruel things to other people. There's a lot of people that die so Americans can be safe. But also, it's not good for us either. It's not a good way to live in a gated community, you know? If you let folks pour in, like any other wave, it'll kind of slosh, and then things will be different. I don't know, like, what'll really happen? A bunch of people, like, will they just come with knives and start killing everybody? I don't think so.
So anyways,
he's just stupid. So he just doesn't, he does not understand enough about what's going on, because to say that America is the only place where things are great, get your head out of your ass. Go to almost anywhere in Europe. Obviously, there's a war in Ukraine. Let's leave that alone. But almost anywhere in Europe is great. Canada is great. Japan is great. There's so many places that have amazing cultures and things are great. And then people aren't just vying to get into the United States. Fucking half their population is obese. People don't want that shit. That's just such a stupid, arrogant thing to say. But it's just so disconnected with the reality of the world. Like saying, open your borders. Remember that thing you and I watched where the guy used the gumballs and he showed you the significance of what it would have if you had an open border? America can't make a dent in the world's problem that way. All you're going to do is ruin America. And like, I don't agree with having a completely closed border. But that idea, asinine, just stupid.
But what you have to realize is they're not coming from it of the mentality of we'll fix the other world's poverty issues by allowing everybody in here. It's that we shouldn't be living so good here.
Well, that guy should get off his ivory tower and shut the fuck up, because the guy's a multimillionaire who's like that. What a privileged position to say that from. Cool. You want to put your money where your mouth is? Then give all your shit away and go live on the street, because that's how the rest of them are living. The people that you want to bring into the country, which again, I don't think we should. I wish we lived in a world where everybody had more, and I wish we could do more for everybody around the world. I do feel that way. However, it's unrealistic. And when you're in that position and you've got everything in the world that you could ever want, and you can say something like that, I just feel like you're coming from a very disconnected position.
So I want to break down the psychological factor of what I think is happening here from a lot of these people that take this position. If you are granted, like, let's use their language for a second. If you are granted the privilege of being born in this era, in this country, which 110% is better than humanity has ever had before.
Agreed.
What's that line from Spider-Man by Uncle Ben, right? With great power comes great responsibility.
Sure.
With this, we have been given a great power to have prosperity. We don't have to be bogged down with disease and economic poverty and all of this kind of stuff. We don't need to be. I mean, we're quickly heading that way. But there's a lot of people that don't want that responsibility of going, oh my God, I've been given a gift of a good life and I can make something out of this. And they can't bring themselves to deal with that responsibility. So they want to destroy the thing that is thrusting that responsibility of a good life upon them.
It's privilege guilt.
Yes.
Rather than white guilt, it's privilege guilt.
Yes.
Because why don't you just shut the fuck up and try to solve the problem in other ways? Why don't you try to make those other countries better off? Why don't you try to make them more sustainable, help them fix their economy and make those places greater? Because you can't put them all into America and fix this problem. That's a better solution. And again, that's where I kind of go with the ignorance thing. But I get it. That's actually a good point.
He even said it himself, right? I don't want things to be this good here. And then, but you look at, okay, what's the effect of all of these things happening? Like even now, we're seeing it, right? Okay, we're pouring people in here, and we're saying that that's boosting our economy because we're adding more workers. Even the Bank of Canada governor came out recently and said, yeah, we've been very good at growing our economy by adding workers, but we've been much less successful at increasing our output per worker, and this is catching up to us. And so, yes, we are now at this point where we have all of this labor, but we have nowhere to direct it to because we're not being productive.
Yes.
And you can't, like, and this is my point, is like, people will say, okay, well, you're being heartless towards people that want more opportunity and a better life. And I can totally understand how it comes off that way. But like, again, you look at the people that are coming over here and it's like they're promised all of this opportunity and then they end up working at Tim Hortons or driving bikes for Uber Eats or all of this. And they're just like, oh, this is like, I'm a wage slave here.
A significant portion, I forget what it was. I'm so annoyed with that. A significant portion of new immigrants, that's from 2005, do not want to be in this country anymore because of a lack of opportunity. Like I think it was over 50%. Like it was a pretty large margin of people. And you think about it from 2005, that's not like, oh, I just got here last year. It's, I've had almost 20 years to build a life here. Still, fuck this place.
Yeah. But then here's where it comes to the why we're not being productive is because you need businesses to in corporations to want to start here, to want to invest in our country. And why would they do that? Like, so Trevor Tome, an economist from the University of Calgary, pointed out, quote, Canada's lowest tax jurisdiction, which is Alberta, has a higher tax rate than the United States' highest tax jurisdiction. So no matter where top talent lives in Canada, they face a higher tax rate than they would in any state in America.
I thought they were a 37th. That's weird. Maybe that's just shifted recently.
So the number, with California, it was 46.5% effective tax rate, and in Alberta, it was 47%. So it was very close.
Yeah. So I remember reading something last year that ranked countries based on their taxation, and it was all North America. So you're looking at basically United States and Canada side by side, and it was like Alberta was like in the top 10 for a long time, like almost better than the significant number of states. But now, from what I remembered, it was all the way down to 37th. But maybe it was 47th, and maybe they just got bumped out. Yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yeah, and we have been fast deteriorating on that front for the last couple decades. It's not just since Trudeau. Trudeau has 100% thrown fuel on the fire. But this has been a trend for Canada for decades. But even RBC pointed out that, quote, Canada is 30% less productive than the US and closer to lower income states like Alabama in terms of economic performance than tech-rich California or New York. So since 1970, we have fallen from sixth most productive economy in the OECD to the 18th. So we have been, to your point, we're plummeting down that list. And like, how big of a joke is that? That like Canada is being compared to Alabama in terms of economic performance.
Well, I think what is it? The OECD said that we're going to be the poorest performing country in terms of productivity for the next like 2 decades or something.
4 decades.
4 decades. Like, that's wild. I mean, it's interesting when you look at this and go, what one political group's policy was able to do in 9 years. Because that's kind of why we are where we are. And look, I don't know what the difference would have been if it was conservative versus liberal. And maybe you and I just got to see, it was like the crescendo. It was a 9-year crescendo. It was this period where maybe the result of a lot of bad policy and a lot of bad politics over decades kind of got us to this point. But this last decade, under liberal rule, has been wildly messed up for this country.
Yeah, and you know, again, I do think it's important to state that this has been a trend in Canada for decades, like since 1970. We've been kind of falling down that list.
Since the old Trudeau was here.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, cool. Let's bookend it. What a douche.
But it has been like our decline has been exponential since then. Like it's kind of like that. It's like, how does your life fall apart? A bunch of slow pieces crumbling and then eventually a cliff.
Right.
And it's like, we're on that cliff right now. But I know that this talk can give off a lot of hopelessness and go like, oh my God, okay, we as Canadians are doomed. But like, there is a fix to this, which is to rapidly cut our government spending, to rapidly decrease our taxation rates, and then allow a flood of investment to come into the country.
Yeah.
You're even seeing that right now with what Argentina's doing. You know, Argentina was extremely bloated, high inflation, highest inflation in the world. Nobody wanted to invest there because their economy was one of the worst in the world as far as its trajectory. And then what did Milei do? Within a couple months, all of a sudden, he's slashed everything. Like, he's come in there with a very anarcho-capitalist idea.
He's at single-digit inflation now, though.
And now he's got down to single-digit inflation. And now people like Elon Musk are sitting on the global stage going, hey, I think everybody should seriously consider investing in Argentina. If this trend continues, things could be very prosperous here over the next few decades. And then, so you go, okay, we're doing the exact opposite. So there very much is a solution to these things, but everything our current government is doing is actually causing that problem to get worse and worse.
Yeah, I totally agree. No, we're 100% on the same page. But it kind of goes back to what I said originally. There's a couple things we have to do. First of all, we have to show that we can actually scale infrastructure. We need to do that. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is, and when I say we need to be more efficient with government spending, that's a catch-all. We need to improve investment. We need to minimize the size of government. We need to make government spending more efficient. And then, you do all those things at once, and then you get that result. However, back to the original point, when it comes to letting 50 million more people in this country, how do you possibly manage the volume of people? Because all you need is one group, like that guy in that video. You need one group to say, hey, we have an intention here. We want to be the majority, and then it's our country. How do you stop that? How do you stop it? Because anything, if you make one immigrant leave, that's a world of political trouble. The liberal strategy has everything has been about equality. So you think they're going to step on the toes of xenophobia and racism to save the culture of the country? 0% chance, or they already would have done it. So we're heading down a bad road regardless. Even if we can find a way to make it work, I think we're still fucked.
Well, yeah. On a positive note, Pierre has come out recently. I think it was last week. He came out and kind of made his first remarks on immigration, because for the longest time, he was kind of tiptoeing around it, saying, okay, well, we're going to just tie immigration numbers to our infrastructure and our economic development. But he did come out last week and just full outright stated that there will be massive cuts in the immigration numbers.
He said this before, and he's right. You're going to scale immigration with infrastructure. That's the whole, look, there's two sides to this. One, you can say we're going to lose the culture, which was your argument, which I agree with, which I think is definitely something to consider. Especially considering the people that want to come in here and make it their own. That is a problem. But his point was infrastructure. That's how I feel about immigration too. I have no issue with anybody coming here and looking for opportunity. It's just that we don't want to make the quality of life so much worse for everybody here and for the new people coming in, because we're bringing them in at such a rate that we can't keep up.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even a question now of whether, our quality of life might decline if we continue on this. It's like, no, it already has.
Exactly. It's not xenophobic and it's not racist. It's just data driven at this point.
There was a new report that just came out from the Food Banks Canada, right, that reveals a hidden level of poverty, with 25% of Canadians unable to afford 2 or more household necessities. Mm-hmm. This figure is significantly higher than the official poverty rate reported by Statistics Canada. Authored by Michael Mendelson, a former deputy minister, and Gerdana Naughton, a public policy professor, the report found that 30% of Canadians aged 18 to 30 and 44.5% of single-parent families cannot afford 2 or more essentials. So, again, it's already here.
Yeah, that was pretty alarming to say that a quarter of the country, so 10 million people, are sort of in poverty in some sense. It's just pretty wild. Exactly. Like you said, it's gotten to that point already.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I do like to think about solutions to problems. But I think one of the biggest solutions is to change our current sitting government.
Yeah.
Because their policies. So yes, you and I can discuss ways to make this happen. Improve government spending, find ways to increase or scale infrastructure. There are ways to do this, cutting these taxes to drive investment. I agree with all that stuff, but we need to change political policy, because the things that I just discussed, you and I can contribute to. We can do that. But if we don't change political policy, these people have too much power. They are the reason why we are where we are right now. So if they maintain power, this cannot get any better. And I'm hopeful that Pierre Poilievre will put his money where his mouth is, will do the things he says he's going to do. If he doesn't, I have zero faith in politics in Canada. None, zero, gone.
Yeah.
And even if he has the intention, but it's completely stifled by, say, a majority Liberal Senate, again, I'm done. I have no faith in the system. I just don't know what else to do at that point. How do you bank on being a part of this country when you know where it's going and how they've got a stranglehold on the political system, which makes all these decisions, which is fucking this place up?
All right, so our next story for the day, we have got Canada passes bill to address environmental racism. Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party, expressed her delight as her bill to combat quote-unquote environmental racism in Canada passed. May highlighted that environmental racism has been an issue in Canada for decades, and she's thrilled to bring security to minority groups and people of color. Bill C-226 will create a national strategy to tackle the unequal impacts of climate change on people of color, aiming to reduce racial discrimination and disadvantages. One additional point of interest in the bill is that it has the power to compensate environmentally racialized communities affected by global warming. So considering that we just covered how 25% of Canadians are living in poverty and economic productivity is falling through the floor, how can our politicians justify focusing on initiatives like this?
Well, they can, but they're completely disconnected from reality, right? This woman, it seems a little off kilter to me, but that's fine. I mean, maybe it's the Green Party vibe. But pushing this thing forward, like she looks like she's in her 60s and she's a white lady. What does she know about any of these problems? Just that alone, let alone, like you said, look what's happened to the economy. I mean, the fact that our tax dollars are spent on this nonsense amidst a staggering, 300% increase in grocery costs, unattainable housing, as you and I both know, for an entire generation. This could be a generational problem, and an average effective tax rate of, what did you say, 52%, all under Justin Trudeau's leadership? I mean, everybody should be up in arms. This country, this should be an uproar when shit like this happens. But they give themselves a little gold star. Look at me, I did something. Great.
Yeah.
Moving the needle. Way to go.
And you know what? Like, so I talk a lot about how, say, a lot of these social factors and social movements that are in place right now stem from Marxist ideology, right? Like this idea that everything can fall into oppressor or oppressed. That's the nutshell of Marxism. And I know that's a vast oversimplification, but
no, it's good though. It's the mechanism behind the whole system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's crazy is people will be like, oh, it's not like that. You're so hyperbolic. It's nothing crazy like Marxism. I actually kind of agree in the sense that it's worse because in Marxism, you have the oppressed class and the oppressor class, which is considered the bourgeoisie, which is like the capitalists, the middle class, so to speak. And then you've got the proletariat, which is the working class, right? So Marx, when he developed Marxism, he only had two different lines to put discrimination between against, essentially, right? It goes, okay, you either have capital or you don't. That's it. Well, this new shit is like, look at this. Now we're getting into the point where we're looking at environmentalism through the lens of race.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's so much worse because now you don't have just bourgeoisie and proletariat. You've got Black people, Muslims, gay people,
women, but they're at the bottom now. No one cares about them anymore. Yeah, they're not
women,
important.
and then on the other end, you've got straight, white, able-bodied, cisgendered Christian males. There is so many more variables that you are trying to account to.
Yeah, it's
and
wild.
you're like, this is insane. And look at the level of insanity it gets to, because now in Ottawa, they're now wanting to do race-based tree planting, right? Tree equity.
I had such a laugh when I read this. I'm like, you got to be kidding. I almost had to have one of those "it's not satire" moments again. What the fuck?
In Marxism, you've got the idea where it's like, okay, well, the world will be fixed if we just bring equality of economic opportunity, right? Well, first of all, I disagree with that, because even it's that famous idea where it's like, bread alone does not get men through the day. Like they need a lot more than just economics to be able to feel whole as an individual.
I agree.
And then, but with this, like, now we're getting into the point where it's like trees need to be equally dispersed between community groups.
To me, what's so wild is you're that far down now. You're running out of everything else to racialize and to make an issue. So now you're racializing the planting of trees. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? How does this make any sense? And I also thought about this. I'm like, more white people live in poverty than any other race in this country. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. Information came out yesterday or 2 days ago. So, and what my point in saying that is they're intermixed, right? So you've got white people living in every category. So how do you make this race-based tree planting a thing? You just go knock on everybody's doors and say how many people are Black? How are you actually going to execute this strategy without planting trees for white people anyway? This is so ridiculous. This is so stupid. Oh my God. The fact that we spend our money on these things makes me, I can't believe it.
It's literally insanity being forced top down onto society.
Can you imagine? So remember when you were a kid and you did like a book report and you were excited how well you did? They're going to love this. I'm going to get an A+. You go to school, you're fucking chipper about it. Let's go. You know what I mean? Or you do like speeches at school and stuff. You'd be so excited. And then you look back, you're like, wow, I was a total nerd.
Yeah.
This is kind of like that idea on steroids, but for an adult. Like, how do you think this person was like, you know what? We're going to racialize trees. Let's go. And then, this is the idea. This is the whole plan. Everybody come in. I got a great idea. Everyone sits at this round table. And this is the plan our tax dollars come up with. Everyone should be shot. Maybe not dead, just in the leg, but get the hell out of office.
And you know what's crazy is nobody in that room will speak up, because the first person be like, hey, do we really need to have equality of trees? Would be like, everybody in that room would just be like, Oh, so you don't care about minorities, do you? You're
wild.
racist. You're like, no. I just don't think that tree equity is a major focus that we should be
It's
on.
like, what is it? Probably the largest company in this country is the federal workforce, I would imagine, or let's say government workforce in general. So government and government extension have the most employees in this entire country, right? And to keep your job, you have to buy into every delusion that's happening right now. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
Of course, nobody can step up and say anything. It's wild right now.
Yeah. And then you see, okay, so we have the funds and resources somehow to promote these things, but then we also just saw that Montreal is dropping its Canada Day parade due to politics and bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So like the organizer of Montreal's Canada Day parade, Nicholas Cohen, has canceled this year's event, blaming red tape and politics. Cohen cited escalating difficulties with permits, funding, and last-minute rule changes as key issues. So right now, okay, again, going back to that cultural issue, like this is nobody... It's going to be very hard at this point to convince me, especially with how much reading I've done into the origins of this Marxist ideology and also just where all of this diversity and social justice stuff comes, where it's like that goal is to break down, whether it's through immigration, whether it's through climate change, whether it's this, whatever. That goal is to break down Canadian identity and Canada's way of life.
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking when I saw this. I'm like, a 50-year tradition gone to the wayside. When you've actually got the largest government infrastructure in history, you can't execute a Canada Day parade. The country that basically pays your wage. What are we talking about here? You know what I mean? For me, it's like, if this isn't a glaring example of what our once great nation has become, honestly, I don't know what is.
Yeah. And while the climate insanity is international, with moving on to our next story, we've got Just Stop Oil protesters vandalizing the historic Stonehenge monument in the UK while their American counterparts attack the PGA Tour. So 2 climate protesters from Just Stop Oil were arrested for spraying orange paint on Stonehenge, occurring a day before the summer solstice celebration at the 4,500-year-old monument. While in America, protesters disrupted the Travelers Championship PGA tournament by storming the 18th green as the final group was lining up their putts. The protesters had smoke and other items that left residue on the greens, forcing officials to clean up some of the mess before play could continue. Just Stop Oil used this moment to call for stronger measures to phase out fossil fuels by 2030, and the group asserts that continuing fossil fuel use will cause widespread fatalities. So do you think things like this helps or hurts their cause?
It only hurts their cause. Look, these people are basically a fucking pariah at this point. I hate them all.
Yeah.
They obviously don't understand how the world works. You cut oil and everything by 2030, billions of people are going to die. It's not an option.
The clothes they are wearing while they're protesting are dependent on 100%.
Oil. The paint that they're using. What are we talking about? And I get really frustrated with this because if you want to make a difference, go clean up a beach.
Yeah.
Don't sit there and spray paint. Look, everyone knows the world at scale is working to reduce its oil consumption. We are losing tons of money. Our economy is in the fucking toilet, primarily, or not primarily. One of the big reasons is because of this green energy push. We are doing more than we should be doing currently. You think spray painting some shit is going to make a difference? You're just an idiot. Every person that's in this group is a fucking moron, and most of the guys in this group just can't get laid, so they're doing this shit, trying to find their way in the world to have some sex because they're fucking losers.
Do you know that this is actually an evolutionary mating strategy? And it's funny because this is like legitimately the technical term for it. It's called the sneaky fucker strategy. So what apes will do, and I believe it was this was found in orangutans, I believe, but what they would do is, while alpha males were present around females, because they usually police who is able to mate with 100%. The females, and also those females are just more interested in mating with the alpha male, right? So what they'll do is they'll make sure that the alpha male is distracted, or while he's off doing something else, they will essentially sneak their way into the female circle and try to get sex that way. So it's all about distracting and getting away from the alpha male in order to procreate. And then you look at what this is happening. It's like, yes, that's exactly what is happening. These guys in these, if you go look at them, they look like 30-year-old virgins. And then their whole play is like, okay, well, I can't compete in the real sexual marketplace.
Nope.
on these whatever, whether it be apps or at the bar or whatever. So I need to ally myself. I'm an ally.
Exactly. It's like these ultra feminist dudes too. Like, bro, get a pair of balls, shut the fuck up. Just, I don't know, get a haircut, figure it out, man.
Mm-hmm.
But this kind of bullshit. Yeah, like I said that not to almost be hyperbolic, but it's actually what I think. Like I look at the guys that are doing this, I'm like, oh, you guys are all bottom of the food chain. Every single one of you. Good luck.
And so what's funny too is, so Just Stop Oil is funded by oil tycoons. So the Rockefeller family is actually funding the organization that is in charge of Just Stop Oil. Now, the whole press release strategy for this is saying, well, you know, the inheritance of the Rockefeller fortune.
Yeah, I saw that.
So
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, John D. Rockefeller was the first billionaire in America, and he got that through a monopoly on oil. And he actually monopolized the pharmaceutical industry as well through his oil.
Also using those. Yeah. That's why. Yeah.
So his family is now saying, we feel so guilty that we have all of this money because of our oil fortunes that we're going to fund the destruction of oil, right? Again, it maybe this is the factor, going back to what I was talking about with the Louis C.K. thing. It's kind of like I can't deal with this responsibility of all this wealth and stuff that I've been given, in this opportunity that I've been given. So therefore I want to destroy the thing that is thrusting this responsibility upon me. Maybe that is a factor here. Or I look at it and go, or is this a very smart play? It's like a 4D chess move to try to discredit the Just Stop Oil movement, to make climate protesters look so insane. That would be a legitimate strategy on the public stage to say, oh, look at the people that want this fossil fuel change. Look how insane they are. And then that actually can benefit them financially.
So it looks like after 146 years, the Rockefeller family basically exited the oil business in 2016.
Okay.
So I'm of the mind that 4D chess, what's their next move? Is it renewables?
Yeah, maybe.
So let's cut this business and let's move on to that.
Yeah.
That family's involved in so many things and has so much wealth. I don't trust a single thing that they do.
No.
And even though you can have one person that might be virtuous, this woman that's out there saying, we need to stop this. You got a massive, you got probably 1,000 people that are sucking off the tit of that family fortune. So that's not changing.
Yeah.
4D chess, like they got out for a reason. They care about money. They probably do care about a lot of other things. They're probably very decent people. Some of them. I think most people have decency in them, but their strategy is maintain money and maintain power. That's exactly what it is. So one way or another, there's something funny going on here.
Well, and this has been a strategy of the Rockefellers for time, because, okay, there was a famous moment. It's called the Ludlow Massacre. If anybody wants to go look it up, what happened was there was I can't remember if it was a mining operation or whether it was one of his oil operations, but there was a town of workers that essentially lived in this little town, but this whole town was built around his business. And they went on strike to protest working conditions and living conditions. They all went on strike and they started causing mayhem, which really interrupted Rockefeller's production. And what did he do? He hired a bunch of mercenaries to go in and slaughter them. Women, children, all of this, like slaughtered them. And so, like, this is well known. This is not a conspiracy. Like, it's called the Ludlow Massacre. Anybody can go look it up. Immediately after that, there was so much negative press coming his way and his family's way that this is when he started on his whole philanthropy kick.
Right.
He went, okay, I need to do some media PR here. He would go through towns and hand out $10 to the poor kids and the children and all of this kind of stuff. And then he'd start donating to all of these charities. And the whole thing was like, I am being viewed as like a ruthless businessman, and I need to change this public perception of me. I mean, we saw the same thing with Bill Gates in the 90s too. Bill Gates was looked at as this like serial monopolizer, ruthless businessman. He got hit with antitrust laws and got found guilty of monopolizing industries. And then immediately what happened after that in the 90s? All of a sudden, oh my God, I am the savior of world health.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But now it's evil again. It's almost like you couldn't weed it out of them. It's the old, you can't take the trailer park out of the girls situation with that guy. He's just fucking, I don't know. For me, I actually think he's one of the bad guys. I think a lot of times very wealthy people get categorized as evil. I think a lot of them are pretty decent. I think a lot of times, especially like, that's just how I feel. I don't think money inherently makes you bad. And then we all try to get it. We're all playing a game of Monopoly. So I don't think it makes you evil. I think it's something, a label people wear because other people want it. I think it comes more from jealousy than reality. But maybe there's a line you cross when you're worth over 10, 20 billion and bad things have to happen. Like, Elon Musk with electric cars and mining precious metals. You just look at that and you go, okay, well, I don't think he's inherently evil, but I can see some bad connections there. Bill Gates to me is one of the bad guys. He's just one of the bad guys. You look at all the moves he makes and everything he's doing. I don't think he's serving humanity. But the thing is, maybe he thinks he is. I don't know. But he's one of the guys that, yeah, not for me, man. But it's the same thing you saw with Nobel, right? Alfred Nobel, who invented, I think it was dynamite, and then spent the rest of his life creating the Nobel Prize for advancements in science and health and all these other things to try to rebrand and rebuild his name. Now, I don't think it was quite the same. I think it was more of an internal thing for himself. I think he felt like he should do more to contribute in a positive way. But yeah, you totally see it. Yeah, 100%. But I mean, when it comes to the Rockefellers, I don't buy it for a second. No, I just don't.
Neither do I. But then
when it comes to these stupid oil protests, sorry, go ahead.
Or I was just going to actually circle back to the oil protesters, which, okay, let's look at the effect of what their proposed policies to save the world would do. We saw a Deloitte report recently come out where the federal emissions cap will reduce Canada's GDP by $282 billion, right?
Over the next decade, yeah.
Like, if you get rid of, and I'm not saying there isn't issues with the oil and gas industry. Again, guys like Rockefeller, who have been pivotal in the oil and gas industry, are 100%. I do believe John D. Rockefeller in specific was definitely an evil man. But it's not like because I have so much admiration for these people that I don't want to see the oil and gas industry just completely offed. It's because, like, if you look at society like a functioning organism, oil is like blood in our societies. It is what allows everything to function. It's how everything gets moved around, whether it be the truck that delivers your groceries, whether it be the heating and cooling in the grocery store that keeps the food fresh, or whether it be the clothes on your back, the medical shit in hospitals. All of this is dependent on oil and gas. And so, look, if we can do a slow transition away from that, where we do create new technologies, by all means, for sure. If there's a better way forward, I'm all for it. But just destroying what has built what we have in order to, and then not really actually having a viable solution.
No.
They'll tell you that the sustainable world in the sustainable energy sector can take on all of this
stuff. We already know that it
bullshit.
can. We know we don't have the efficiency. We know we don't have the technology to get there yet. We just don't have it. We know that the resources like solar energy, thermal, we know these things exist. We know that they're available. We don't know how to harness them effectively. We don't know how to store them effectively. That's just the reality we live in. Not that that's not where we should go, but yeah, we're certainly ruining today for a tomorrow, but we don't know if tomorrow's a week from now, 100 years from now. We don't know yet. So I don't understand why we're following this strategy.
And you know what's crazy? Okay, even if you look at so one thing that the climate people will talk about is how much it's going to affect our economy in the future, 100 years down the line. At 2100, it's going to have all of these economic impacts on the way that we live. So one thing that Bjorn Lomborg, an economist, has pointed out in his book called False Alarm, which I'd highly recommend anybody going and watching, that economic impact isn't that things would decline by 2100 and we'd actually have a worse off economy than we do now. It's that it wouldn't grow as much as it would. And so the estimate that Bjorn Lomborg puts forward is that our GDP would be the world's GDP would be 4% lower in 2100 if we did nothing, which, okay, sure, maybe, hey, if we can do some things to boost that GDP, great. But you look at these like this emissions cap, it will, our GDP would fall by 4.5%, or sorry, Alberta's GDP would fall by 4.5%.
Yeah, I think ours was down like 1.8 or 1.9%.
But overall, yeah.
Nearly 2 in Canada.
But okay, so like we're actually going to have one case, you do nothing and the economy doesn't grow as much as it could. The other case, their proposed solution actually results in a decline.
Just
in
make
economic.
it terrible now instead. It's like, why? How does that make any sense whatsoever?
Yeah, insanity.
In case you missed it, we recently launched a Substack channel for Blendr. We felt that we contribute more to the community and to Canadians by launching a channel dedicated to our own investigative journalism and opinion pieces. So for the next week, we'll be offering our monthly subscription at $5 a month for life. Following this initial period, we will be increasing the cost to $10. The reason we're charging is to keep the lights on to keep us going without the need for an abundance of corporate partners. As a Substack subscriber, you'll also gain access to additional episodes of our podcast, an audience Q&A, and a community of people who are interested in working together to push back against corruption and authoritarianism in this country. Plus, you get a free week-long trial.
All right, moving on to our next story for the day. We have got Ottawa schools see massive student absence amid protests against Pride Month. On June 15th, parents gathered on Parliament Hill in Ottawa to protest Pride Month activities in schools, leading to widespread student absences. The organizers reported absentee rates as high as 70% in some schools, with one elementary school seeing 591 out of 738 students boycott the pride flag. I'd probably be willing to bet that that was like a Catholic school or something. But
yeah, 100%.
Anyways, organizers emphasized parental rights and promoted, quote, My Child June, advocating for pro-family values and denouncing LGBT ideology in classrooms. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau criticized these protests, labeling participants as transphobic and homophobic, while Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre defended parents' rights to determine their child's values and lessons. So will Canada's public schools take the hint and remove this ideology from the classroom, or double down and just keep blazing forward with it?
Well, again, it depends. There's a couple things to consider. First, who's in charge of the country? If it's Liberals, it's going to continue. Second thing you have to consider is how much control does the new Conservative government have to change what's happening inside the schools? A lot of it's provincial based, but we know a lot, like I don't know what it is in Canada, but in the United States, it's 10-1 Liberal or Democrat to Republican in terms of teachers. So it is completely ruled by Liberals, that whole system. So if they want to maintain this narrative, they are going to be very challenging to overturn. But here's the problem I have. This has nothing. Look, we do not celebrate heterosexuality in public school. Why should we be celebrating pride? People go, well, because it's about inclusion and equity and stuff. Kids under 13 don't give a fuck what color you are, what your sexual preference is. They don't even have one. They just think everybody's pretty much the same. That's what people think. So why are you introducing this to these kids when none of this should be a topic of conversation? That's my big issue here. You want to have Pride Month? Go ahead. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Go be yourself. You want to have a month for it? Go nuts. Do I think it's a little much? Yeah, considering Remembrance Day gets one day. Yeah, I do think it's a little much. But again, my opinion doesn't really matter. Just, again, leave the kids alone. Leave them alone. They are the most and should always be the most protected class. There is no reason to introduce anything at all that sexualizes these kids in any way. And you sent me something the other day, a couple books that we were making jokes about that we saw on the shows, but they were kids' coloring books. And it was about sex being a fun word. I'm like, what the fuck? What is happening? Okay, what kind of weird, creepy fuck writes that book in the first place? You need a slap in the mouth, 100%. And then you look at sort of how that gets daisy chained into the public school system. What are we doing to these kids? What are you trying to have happen? Why are you trying to introduce, look, you want to keep your kids pure as long as possible. Santa Claus is real as long as possible. I don't want my kids being introduced to this stuff for as long as possible. It's not that, it's not going to be safe. No, we're talking about children that are under 13. The number of kids under 13 that were having sex when we were young was under 1%. Stop talking to these kids about this stuff. This is fucking insane.
I used to think that this whole LGBT movement was kind of a grassroots thing. It was just the natural progression of society, and things would have went this way no matter what. I don't believe that anymore. I've dug deep into where this ideology came from, the academics that push it forward, and unfortunately, now that I've done that, I can see where this goes, and I've been debating talking about this for a long time because it's fucking dark, and it's just, I don't want it to sound like I'm putting this on all gay people in general, because it's not. It's the people in academia and the intellectuals that are trying to push forward this movement.
Yeah, well, I actually want to say one thing, because I feel like you're going to say something that's a little harsh, but I'm probably going to agree with it. I was actually feeling bad the other day for a lot of gay people that I know that have fought for equality and fought to not be ostracized or be put in a bad spot because of their sexual preference. And I feel like that fight is all going to waste in a sense right now, because this very small group of people that are, I don't know, they're extremists in some way, are bastardizing this movement and making it into something that's very dark that a lot of people are pushing against. And I actually feel bad for that majority of people that were in this for the right reasons. It's kind of tough.
So I've made this point on the podcast before, was that Marxist intellectuals and academics and revolutionaries couldn't understand why it wasn't taking hold in the West when it was sweeping across Eastern Europe and Asia as well. And what they realized was they were saying that, yes, the working class, which was typically the proletariat that they wanted to lead forward this revolution against the bourgeoisie, the working class, they would say this, the working class let us down in America because they weren't ready for the revolution. Well, it's because they didn't want to revolutionize. Their life was pretty decent as it was. So what these people did, and when I mean these people, primarily it comes out of something called the Frankfurt School, which was developed in the 1930s, I believe, in Germany. And it was essentially an intellectual hub for Marxist ideologues. And one of the most notable in this area that, I mean, he wrote from prison. He got jailed by Mussolini in Italy for being a Marxist. But anyways, he was writing from jail, and what he said was, yes, okay, there seems to be this like brick wall that isn't allowing Marxism into the West, and that is their culture. They have a strong culture. So Mao, when he led his Marxist revolution in China, there was this famous instance where he was going to war against the Nationals, and he called it the Long March South because it was their war walk into Beijing,
Right.
and to overtake Beijing. What Antonio Gramsci said, this Marxist intellectual, was, we need a long march through the institutions. So if we are going to allow Marxism to take hold, or if we're going to push forward a Marxist revolution in the West, we need to subvert their institutions, mainly education.
That's where it all starts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now take these intellectuals from the Frankfurt School. One of them, William Reich, who was the author of The Sexual Revolution, was dubbed by the New Yorker as the, quote, father of the sexual revolution. And in his preference to the fourth edition of the book, published in 1949, Reich immediately started into a vigorous defense of, quote, the genital rights of children adolescents, which he noted he began pioneering from a Marxist perspective in 1928 when he founded his Socialist Society for Sexual Consultation and Sexual Research in Vienna. Reich was deeply upset that parents didn't tolerate children engaging in sexual play, claiming it was necessary for a natural, healthy development. Reich regretted that his many contemporaries resisted these, quote, attempts to guarantee the love life of children and adolescents. In the preface to his third edition, Reich championed, quote, free life expressions of newborn infants, of small children, adolescents, and adult men and women.
So there's something physiological that happens to humans that gets us ready to have sexual intercourse. It's called puberty. So we have a system that's already been built that knows a lot more than all this information and all these religions and all this crap that says, hey, now's the time when you're ready. Before then, I think all children should get love and affection, not sexual affection. What the fuck is wrong with these people? You wait till you go through that process and then you're ready. That to me is, I don't want to say science. That is biology giving us the answers. We don't have to look into this. It is already clear.
So their whole idea with this, right? Because they want liberation and equality and all this, right? No, like any sort of social norm is a tyranny in their mind. So to them, they go, well, children can experience sexual pleasure. And that's a totally natural, normal function. So who are you to deny them that right that they have? In their minds, it would be very similar to denying your child the ability to see until he's 15, right? Well, this is just a natural function. So why aren't they allowed it? There was another guy, Harry Hay, who lived from 1912 to 2002 and was a radical political activist and dubbed by his own biographer as, quote, the founder of the modern gay movement, and by Hay expert Will Roscoe as the founder of gay liberation. So he was like the initial person pushing forward this whole gay revolution in America. Roscoe underscored Hay's unique role in fashioning a strange trinity of, quote, Marxism, Native American revivalism, and New Age spirituality. So this is also the guy, by the way, like these are not just fringe people. This is the guy that came up with that whole concept of two-spirit. So like the 2S at the beginning of the LGBTQ now. So
really
like,
moving the needle, pal.
So again, these are not just fringe people. These are like the direct thought leaders in this movement. And so even on his Wikipedia page, which is notorious for going soft on Marxist, states, quote, Hay was a prominent American gay rights activist, communist, pro-pedophilia activist for the North American Man-Boy Lovers Association.
What?
And founder of the Matashi Society, the first sustained gay rights group in the United States. So this guy is like the forefront of it. And again, Harry Hay was also a prominent member of the Communist Party of the USA, joining in 1934.
How is this guy not completely ostracized for being part of the Man Boy Lovers Club? What the fuck's going on?
So one thing, again, so there's three kind of core tenets when it comes to Marxism and communism as, okay, this is how you overthrow the bourgeoisie. Marx thought you need to do away with religion, you need to do away with private property, and you need to do away with the nuclear family. Yeah. And so this in my mind now, if you look at this, all of this, it's like we're going to indoctrinate the kids.
When you back into that,
don't tell your parents. Don't tell your parents.
Yeah.
Like they're oppressive. They want to keep you from being your true self and all of this. This leg of this social justice movement, I believe, is the whole. Like it's the dynamite stick for the nuclear family.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. No, honestly, man, like good rant. I totally agree with all that. When you kind of lay out, here are the three things we need to do to implement Marxism, it's exactly what's happening here. We're doing away with that. 100% we're doing away with religion. I'm not religious personally, but you're seeing how the new culture is the new religion. Like the left-wing ideology right now has become its own religion, which is interesting because I think it gives it strength beyond its political boundaries. Which is going to be kind of, this will be an interesting thing to watch after the next election when conservatives do run this country. It'll be interesting. I'm using that word a lot. I'm keen to see how much power or the size or the force of this group when they don't have political power. So it'll be.
So one last thing that I just want to top this all off with is a clip from Judith Butler, who is dubbed the godmother of queer theory. So she's, again, very, very prominent intellectual in this gender movement and in the feminism movement.
I was identified as representing gender ideology and a threat to children. My work would indoctrinate them, or my work would license pedophilia, or my work and the work of gender more broadly would teach them how to become homosexual, or teach them that they must become homosexual. Which is
kind of true.
Kind of wild.
Kind of worked, yeah.
Talk about where the wild things are. Well, of course, we know Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick said, yes, we do teach that, you know.
So again,
that's not funny.
From their own mouths.
That's not funny.
From their own mouths. They're like, yes, we are indoctrinating the children.
Yes. They're all like, it works. We're all here. Yay. We all got short haircuts and weird glasses. Let's go.
Yeah. So again, like this, to me, I look at this and go, man, it's dark. And again, it sucks because I totally agree with you that like when this comes out, when this movement gets to its inevitable endpoint, which is them promoting complete, just actual indoctrination of children. When it gets to this point, it's going to get real ugly for the normal gay people that are just in society. And I do fear that frustration is going to get pushed onto
towards
them.
Yeah, which I really don't think is fair. That's kind of what I meant earlier is I feel bad because like, I don't want to see that happen. And I also don't want to see it happen for another reason, because it kind of justifies the people that are doing the terrible things. They go, see, look, we have to do this. It's like, no, you've gone too far and you're screwing with our kids. Like, we have to do this at this point. But yeah, I feel bad because they are being the true like gay movement. And I'll call that, what I mean is the people that are doing it for all the right reasons. They are almost being used. They are being weaponized for this system. And they are going to suffer because like you say, when this does boil over, there's going to be a big problem and they are going to be right in the middle of it. And I feel bad because like, think of how long they fought for, because things weren't good for them for a long time. And that was way offside. And then things became normal and everything was good and everything was moving in the right direction. And now it's gone super extreme and it's going to recoil. And I just don't know what what's that? I just don't know what that collateral damage is going to look like.
Well, and to me, hey, if we want to avoid that collateral damage, the only way that that's going to be possible, because again, when you understand where these people want to go, which is the sexual liberation of children, then you have to have part of the movement, those just the gay people that just want to be able to live their life and they don't want anything to do with pushing kids forward down this path or anything like that. They just
the gays against.
They just don't want to be. They just don't want to be jailed for being gay, which is totally reasonable.
What's that, like the Gays Against Groomers page? Like that's massive. I just started following them today. I'm like, oh, there's like millions of people that are part of this movement that are like, hey, look, like feel the same way you and I do. They just have a different sexual preference. We all like. I think what people need to realize is the people that are pushing these things are not average normal people. They are extreme and they do have bad intentions, and they are just using this group as a weapon. It's like we talk about Marxism, weaponizing all these different groups at different times. And I think sometimes they pick the group that's at the top of the culture war, like pro-Palestine right now. They use that, but they also bake themselves into these movements that last decades because this is a long play.
Yeah.
And I just think we need to be able to identify the good and the bad within these groups so we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So I'm hopeful that that's where we get. But again, will enough people understand the cultural nuance here? I don't know. I mean, you and I having this conversation will probably make a few more people aware, but we're two idiots sitting in my restaurant. So I don't know what, you know what I mean? You think about that in terms of scale and it's like, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah. What I think we need to do as a society is we need to find the gray zone on this, which is we shouldn't revert back to the 1960s where gay people were getting jailed and beaten on the streets and it was looked at as a completely normal thing to do that. But then we also shouldn't have this society which like openly celebrates and shoves gay stuff down everybody's throats. That's kind of but you know what I mean? It's like, okay, you do you, me do me.
I think like late 2000s.
Yeah.
Like 2008. Let's just go right back to there.
Yeah.
Everything was aces.
Yeah. All right. Next story for the day. We've got majority of Canadians don't have faith in the government to stop foreign interference in elections. A new Angus Reid poll reveals that most Canadians lack confidence in the major parties or law enforcement to prevent foreign interference in elections. Only 5% trust Parliament significantly, while 47% have no confidence. The Liberal and Conservative parties also fare poorly, with 58% and 45% respectively lacking faith in their ability to address the issue. Confidence in law enforcement is somewhat better, with 50% having some faith in CSIS. Additionally, 69% want all MPs implicated in aiding foreign actors to be named, and 68% believe Parliament needs to take the issue more seriously, especially Prime Minister Trudeau. So where do your confidence levels fall on this? Do you have faith in the government to stop foreign interference?
No, I have a very similar concern. I mean, as per Sam Cooper, our whole system is compromised, and it's been compromised heavily since the early 2000s. Both sides of the aisle, rather. So we kind of know that's already happening. But here's my thought about the Canadian concern. And this I think is interesting. Do most Canadians not have faith in the government's ability to address foreign interference because of partisanship, because of awareness? So I actually think it's partisanship. I think most people are going, well, my party's good, but the other party's bad. So if my party's in, then we can fix it. And if not, we can't. And that's why you have 58% against the Liberals and 45% against the Conservatives. So I think Liberals are saying the same thing. Oh, it's not that bad. The Liberals didn't do this. Everyone's involved in it. And if they don't stay in power, it's not going to get fixed. So I actually think this is mostly about partisanship, whereas I wish it were about awareness. Because if people did listen to Sam Cooper and the things that he said and understanding that our whole system has been deeply compromised, industry, like politics, illegal trade, you name it, they're involved in some way, shape, or form, and they've completely compromised our political system. I'm of the opinion.
By they, you mean, I just want to clear
Chinese.
up Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah. The CCP. I'm of the mind that they actually have so much control that they dictated a minority Liberal government. I think they have that much control because Trudeau would not have pulled the shotgun on that election unless he thought he could win a majority. That's what I'm of the opinion that was his move. However, China wanted him to have a minority, and that's exactly how it went. So how much power do they really have? It seems rather significant. But again, I do feel the same way, but I feel that way because of awareness. And I hope now more people feel that way because of awareness.
Well, and hey, you look at the amount of money that is going through our system from these actors, which is the Chinese national narco groups as well, that are completely allied with the Chinese Communist Party.
100%.
So you look at the money that they've got going through these casinos and real estate and billions of dollars. Like the largest drug group in the world is laundering their money through Canada. I'm sure they're doing it through other nations as well.
No, they are.
But Canada is definitely like their main hub.
Yeah,
right?
it was
Like,
interesting. Their primary hub, yeah.
The leader of that group was living.
He lives in Markham,
right?
Ontario.
Yeah. So, well, he's been jailed and he's in Australia now. Like he's in a jail in Australia now, but he was living in Markham. So, yeah, you look at this and you go, with the amount of finances they have flowing through Canada, they could 100% create political change if they wanted to.
And then when you say that, so just so people are aware, if you think about how to build a business in a country, if you have $1 billion business, you need to be involved in politics. And you don't need to be involved in politics in the sense that you need to be a conservative or a liberal. You need to live above that space. You need to pay both sides because the political winds can change so much. If you try to run a business that has to change its strategy every 4 years based on who's in power, your business will fail. So what you do is you pay both sides. I know people that actively do this. It's very above board. It's very, very common for very wealthy people. So why would we put China above that? If anything, they're just a more efficient, more coordinated group because they got the backing from the CCP. And by the sounds of it, they're laundering so much money and involved in so much industry in Canada that they would want to have not only want to pay both sides, but maybe be able to control the political winds to be able to continue to move their enterprise forward, which it looks like is exactly what's happening with the Liberals.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that when you look at it, you're like, okay, Sam Cooper laid it out. This is their strategy. And then you look back and you go, yeah, that's exactly how things played out. So it's pretty hard to be like, okay, maybe if one of those things happened the way they wanted them to, you could say coincidence.
Yeah.
But when you look at everything across the board, you're like, that's a little bit too much for coincidence there.
So here's the thing though. Now what? Because I don't think either side's really going to fix it. And even if Pierre gets in and goes, I'm going to make these changes, this MP is going to go down, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Think about how deep China's hooks are in this country after what you and I learned from speaking with Sam. Think of how deep they are. They're not just going to go, oh yeah, I guess we'll leave now. They are deeply embedded, probably the most embedded of any other group other than Canada itself. So how do we shake loose? How do we actually do this? I don't know that you can. I hate to just be like, hey, problem. And I'm trying to think of a way to do this. But unless you create a parallel government and parallel economy somehow, how do you overcome this? How do you pull them out? I don't know that you can.
I think there would have to be so much public pushback. Like essentially the peasants are at the gates, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, they're like this. Like what's crazy is that I often think that if I could imprint everything that's going on in my head into the average person, it would take a day for the government to fall. It wouldn't take long. Like if people understood, like even I was sending you yesterday, right? All of the different shit that our government spends our money on internationally.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Like hundreds of millions of dollars to like fight climate change in Asia, all of this shit. You're like, what the fuck? Why is my money getting taken to go there? Like while I'm living in poverty? Like what? And so like, I mean, I say living in poverty and I'm not starving by any means, but I'm not making good money. So like
donate to Blendr.
Yeah. To me, this is the only option. It's like, there's only
so many ways you can fight. And we live in a world right now where we can't use swords and guns and weapons. That's not where this fight is currently at. So you and I can use our voice. And that's what we do. And yes, it does not pay well. But that is what it doesn't, but it is what it is, right? Yeah. Like you and I feel like our impact is more significant than whether or not we can put enough money in our pocket today. And like you said, we're not starving, so we're okay. So it's worth the fight.
And you know what? To be honest, like people will say like, okay, well, what do we do about this? What is the solution? At this point, I think we're living in one of the craziest time periods in human history. And I think it's coming to light that our societies that we've been told are democratic and free, and we're like this beacon of human progress. We are on a consumer front, the things that we can have access to on the front, but like from like a freedom perspective, I have completely gotten rid of the idea that we in the West are anything resembling free. And so to me, I look at that and go, okay, if this is the landscape, if we truly are living in a tyrannical society where we have no power as people, to me, the only thing I can do at this point is save my conscience and be like, this is, I think, the right thing to do. So even if it doesn't pay off results, even if I don't affect change as an individual, at least decades from now, when people look at me and go, what were you doing during that time? I can sit there with a good conscience in myself and go, I did what I could.
You know what's funny? I think about this a lot too. I think about my impact and how I can change the world. And it seems devastating sometimes because I'm only one small grain of sand. You know what I mean? And then, but I choose to believe that there's greatness in every person. It's just a matter of how you wake up that day and you choose to be great. You can choose to be great every single day.
Yep.
And it'll vary in terms of results, but you can make that choice. So one of the things that is important to me is I think I was given a very good set of cards in life. So I feel like I owe the world in a sense. You know what I mean? Like you were talking earlier, born in Canada, white male, blah, blah, blah. But also like, I just feel like I was handed a lot. So I feel like I owe a lot. So that's actually the filter I use for a lot of things that I do. And I want to be able to do more for the world. And, at times I think about, how do we, when I was younger, you're like, how do you solve world hunger? How do you solve the energy crisis? How do you do these things? And those are still in my mind from time to time. But I've realized the limitations of my capability in some ways. And also that there are different chapters to this. And maybe down the road when I do have a lot more money and I'm in a different place, I'll spend more time working on the energy crisis or working on these other things because I like innovation. I like engineering. I find it fascinating. But right now, this is what the world needs. And what Canada needs, what the people in this country need. And what I find interesting now, I just had a baby the other day, first child. It has changed the way I see what I'm doing because now I think I want my kids to look back in a moment like this in 20 years from now and go, this is what my dad was doing to try to affect change when this country was on fire. And that's the way I see this. And that's, it was a good feeling because I started doing this before I had kids. But it definitely gives it more significance and it does make me feel that I'm on the right path, even if I don't have all the money in the world.
Yeah. And I know that it can, seem hopeless and you go, okay, yeah, I am just one person. What change can I make in this world? I even think from just pure spite, like they want you to be demoralized. The people that are orchestrating this destruction want you to feel like you can do nothing. And so if you feel that way, in a sense, you are letting them win. That is what their goal is. So
if you feel that way, it dictates your reality. That's the difference.
I've really, whenever I read history, I both put myself in the seat of the perpetrator and the victim. A lot of people, they'll read about, say, Germany in the 1930s, and they're like, letting Anne Frank stay in my apartment. Yeah. Chances are you wouldn't.
Based on COVID, I would totally agree with you.
Yeah. And second, even if I get tossed in a concentration camp, let's say I'm in the worst victim scenario you can possibly imagine as a human, my only goal at that point would be able to look at those people in this face and be like, you can't break me. Like, that's it. Like, that is enough of a win for me. Like, do you remember, did you ever watch Casino Royale?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that moment where he's getting tortured, he's getting smashed in the balls and he's laughing in his face. Yeah. And like, that is enough. That is a win in a sense, because that person that is torturing you or that person that is trying to destroy your life at the base level of it from like a fucked up human perspective,
they want to beat you.
They want to have the power over you. They want to break you.
Yeah.
And if you can just sit there and just go, you can't. I don't care how bad you make my life. I will still wake up every morning and go forward in the direction that I think is right. Then that to me is like literally like, we say religious. It's like, that's a spiritual win for me in a sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I've just found in life, maybe because it's the duty that I feel I owe the world or because of the person that I've become, but like, I have an endless amount of ambition. It doesn't matter how many times I fall down. It doesn't matter how many times I fail. It doesn't matter how much money I lose, how many businesses the government can take from me. None of it matters. I wake up every day and my candle is fucking hot and it is on fire and I'm ready to go. It just doesn't happen. Like I'm sure that I probably developed this way of thinking, but like in your point of I can't be broken, nothing wears me down for more than a minute. You can't get me. You can't. It doesn't matter what they do. I don't give up. So for me, I kind of see this is just par for the course. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just ready to go. What's next?
All right. Last story for the day. We've got Trudeau hitting rock bottom with his popularity plummeting. A recent poll reveals that 68% of Canadians want Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to resign, reflecting a significant drop in his popularity. The poll suggests that if an election were held now, the Conservatives would secure a, quote, comfortable victory with 42% of the decided vote. The Liberals would come in second with 24%, and the NDP would follow with 18%. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is more popular than his party, with 44% of respondents believing he could make the best prime minister. Despite these stark numbers, Trudeau downplayed the poll results, stating that Canadians are not in, quote, decision mode right now. His inner circle, including Treasury Board President Anita Anand and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, echoed this sentiment, focusing on the government's policy achievements rather than the public opinion, whatever those fucking policy achievements are. I don't know. So, can you claim that we live in a democracy when your government has been found to benefit from foreign interference in elections while simultaneously being hated by the majority of the country, yet people have no ability to remove this traitorous government from office?
It certainly makes you question our democracy or the validity of it, you know? But there's a couple of things that I would the line I would go down rather on this conversation would be, there are still things happening that are trying to push Trudeau out. So there was a traditionally liberal stronghold just got overtaken by a conservative in Toronto. Conservative candidate Don Stewart won the federal by-election for Toronto St. Paul's.
Oh, did he win?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Stewart was elected with 42.1% of the vote, narrowly edging out the liberal candidate Leslie Church. So here's the thing. Now Prime Minister Trudeau will once again be under immense pressure to resign because the Conservatives flipped one of the safest liberal ridings in the country. So a lot of the faith in the party now is gone. That's a big rug that got pulled out from under him, right?
That's insane. When would have been the last time that Toronto was conservative?
And especially that riding, I have no idea.
So the last time the Toronto St. Paul riding was won by a conservative candidate was in the 1979 federal election.
I was close. I said 40 years.
Yeah.
I was pretty close. So I was kind of like, I was like, there's turmoil at that point. So nearly 40 years. This is incredibly significant. So he's going to have to make that decision again. How much faith do people lose? So you can talk all the shit you want to talk, right? You can say, oh, people aren't in voting mode or they're not in decision mode. Whatever, dude. You just lost one of the most significant stronghold liberal positions in the country. How do you bullshit your way out of this? Because the people in your party go, uh-oh, we're all about to lose our job. This guy is wrong. How can we continue going down this road? Because like I say, the data doesn't lie. The votes don't lie. This has happened, right? So if there was any way that they were going to manipulate a system or China was involved, that would have been one of them.
Yeah.
And it still didn't work. Whether they were or not, I don't know, but it didn't work if they were. So I don't know. You look at this and you go, how does he continue to overcome this? The only thing I can think of, and I'll touch on it for 2 seconds because people have heard me talk about it, is he said they're not in decision mode, right? So to say that means, what would you do to influence my decision? Then I go back to just those two things. His push on immigration policy to try to let all illegal immigrants stay because that could buy millions of votes, and the idea of putting in the universal basic income, which will decimate the country even more than it is. But those two things could be a significant shift that would change the decision-making of voters. I don't know if he goes down that road. It's the only way I can see him saying it, but I think he's in some real trouble.
There's definitely no way that he can spin that one. If you lose a riding that, hasn't gone the other way in 40 years, that's a pretty telltale sign that you are getting kicked to the curb heavily. So anyways, anything else you wanted to add today, brother?
Nope, that's everything.
All right, so before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 6 days a week. That's blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.